these might be a little redundant, but hopefully you learn something new. I'll try to leave some time for Q&A at the very end. I condensed the 96-slide presentation down into this. So we'll see. It's possible I'll be done in 15 minutes, while lots of time. Otherwise, you can send us an email to compass@uci.edu afterwards, and I'll get back to you. If you want a deeper dive or anything afterwards, I can schedule that as well. So I'm going to try to go over today a little bit of an overview of what Compass is, a history of the project. I'll show you some screenshots and samples of some of the data that we have and the reports that we provide to the campus. I'll highlight some of the efforts by our partners, and again, I'll try to leave some Q&A. If you have any questions as I'm going, since it's not a large group, just go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll try to answer them as we go. Things have been complicated, all this. All right, so a little overview in history. So Compass is a pseudo acronym. It stands for Comprehensive Analytics for Student Success. What we do is pretty much the left side, so the first two bubbles. So we take data and then synthesize it into reports that we provide to advisors, academic administrators, and faculty in various forms so that they can do analysis and then take action on that data to generate value, which in this case translates to helping students to graduate in a timely manner as well as retain students over time. So all the reports that we provide basically are different ways to view the data, so different lenses into the data that we provide out to the campus. So I have our formal definition at the bottom, so I'll read it. The aim is to use data collection, analysis, measurement, and reporting to inform how to improve retention, time to degree, and completion rates, identify and remediate risk factors, and provide targeted outreach and intervention to various student populations. That's kind of our formal mission statement. All of our reports are created in very close partnership with our users. So this isn't a case where in the distant past IT may have just kind of imposed a solution. This is one where we actually went out and we talked to people. We talked to all the people who use the system or who use systems like this in the past couple of years. And what we call user-driven development. So all of our reports are created in very close partnership with our users. They're all built to common needs. So Brian D. Walden, who's in the audience as well, raise your hand. There you go. We went out and we've chatted with all the undergraduate academic advising directors and some of the counselors and stuff around campus, and we came up with common specifications for the reports. So we aim to deliver reports that are useful to as many units as possible. If we do identify like a really niche case, then we try to just find another solution for those, like other systems that can support or ways to kind of creatively use our data to solve those problems. If it's a really specific request, then there are other workflows and avenues that we direct our users to. We also are continuously gathering user feedback. So I don't just create or have these reports created, shove them out there and not touch them again. Actually go out twice a year and meet one-on-one with each of those advising directors and some other folks around campus to kind of see how things are going, make sure our reports are working the way they expect them to, gather feature requests, ideas for new reports, all that kind of fun stuff. So we're continuously looking to improve how all of our reports work over time. Brandy and I also are invited to the monthly advising director meetings, so we can kind of sit in and kind of embed ourselves in that audience, and that's been really helpful in helping us to identify even more cases where our data can help solve problems. And then we have our support inbox, which was compass@uci.edu, and that's where we gather all sorts of other feature requests, ideas, requests for access, stuff like that. If anybody ever wants to access our reports, I would encourage them, send us an email, we'll see what we can do. If we can't grant you access, we'll figure out other ways to get you the data that you need to do your job. And when we're actually developing reports, we'll go out and do one-on-one meetings, small group meetings with people to kind of show them prototypes of their reports, usually as an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, since our reports, our spreadsheets, as we'll see, just to kind of get their feedback and get that early in the process and adjust as necessary. So we don't have a final product to ship that. We have these incremental deliverables that we partner with our users to enhance over time. So it's a really dense slide. Are there any questions before I move on? Okay. So a little bit of a history behind it. On the left side, you'll see two white bubbles. There was a vendor pilot of some other system that I was not involved in, and I'll just move on with that. In 2016, Brian D. Walden was actually tasked with doing a reboot of the system, and then a little later that year, we delivered a proof of concept. So we delivered two reports to the campus. One report on helping to provide per student demographic data in a bullet format to advising directors, as well as one focus on academic probation data. So this was one of the first times that advisors could on demand get access to this data without having to either wait for the registrar to generate their end-of-term reports and distribute those through web files, which was effective, but there was a bit of time delay because it involved people having to do manual work, or submitting ad hoc requests to the registrar's office, which was a time-consuming process, especially since they're a resource-challenged unit. A few months later, we formally launched the Descriptive for Advisors project, which are a series of 7 reports that I'll show you. We basically moved from this proof of concept into a full production service incredibly rapidly. The advising directors were like, you can't take this away. This is already a super useful tool for more, which we've been happy to build over time. In mid-2017, we launched what was at the time called Predictive Effort, now it's called Data Science Effort. I'm not involved in that project, I'm the Descriptive Analytics lead, but our website, compass.uci.edu, has a little blurb about data science that talks about what goes on there. If there are any questions at the end around it, Brian, you can chime in and answer those. In 2018, we started launching reports aimed at faculty members. So we were providing a lot of data to advisors. Now we took some of those reports, specifically on who's in a class and their demographic makeup and the grades earned in classes, and started exposing that data to faculty members for the first time, along with resources to help them kind of interpret and understand the data, and I'll share that report as well. Is anybody in here an instructor or faculty member? TA? Okay, hello. And then earlier this year, we launched a series of reports for academic administrators. Those are people who are identified as chairs, associate deans, and deans of undergraduate departments with undergraduate majors around the campus. So it's sort of like the faculty reports, taking our data, putting a different lens on it, and exposing it to those users in a way that is useful to them for their purposes. The Compass team itself is 4 people, 3.5 people. Dorenzo is the business intelligence lead. He's the guy who actually builds all of the reports and does all that hard work on actually getting those reports in Cognos, which is a system we use out to advisors and faculty. Josh Ladonna, who's our data science lead, so that's the thing I mentioned before, that was predictive analytics before. Myself is our descriptive analytics lead, and Brian is our overall project lead, who spends about half of her time on this project. This is a cross-campus collaboration, so this isn't just OIT creating reports, as I mentioned. We partner with advisors, that's under the input section. But we're also very strongly partnered with the Office of the Vice Provost of Teaching and Learning. Vice Provost Michael Denon is one of our strongest project champions. He's been really instrumental in helping keep this project around. We also work with OIR, institutional research, a lot. They do a lot of our data curation. They validate our reports. They're great people to just bounce ideas off of. They've been a really valuable partner in this project. We gather input not just from our academic advisors, but also various student success services around campus, such as units in the DUE, student affairs, and others, instructors, academic administrators, and eventually, we're one of our more distant pillars are trying to figure out ways that we can make this data actually useful to students. Oversight is provided by the Vice Provost of Teaching and Learning, Michael Denon, and under the covers, we partner closely with the OIT Data Warehouse team, so they take care of all of our data internally, make sure it's all stored securely, and all that kind of fun stuff, as well as several data source partners around campus. More interesting part, data and reports. This is how we get our data now. This diagram is very slightly out of date, some of the names are wrong. But mostly, if you look at the top left, almost all of our data comes from the UC application. So a lot of the data that we have is self-identified, self-provided by students at the time of their application. There's a whole lot of data points that are in that UC application that's really useful for our reports. That all goes to admissions, which sends some to the registrar, some to OIR that packages it for us, and then it goes into our Compass database. We also pull in data from the academic testing center, so we have placement test information, especially on writing placement. So when the students took a writing exam and where they placed, which class they placed in, for both writing tests, the analytic writing placement exam and the one whose name I just forgot, but it's the one that places students in academic English programs. We also pull in nearly real-time data from the Campus-wide Honors Collegium, as it's not called. And we have access to what's called Canvas data, which is a product that is provided by Instructure, the vendor that supports the Canvas system, which will eventually be used for teaching, research, and that kind of thing around campus. We are also working with several of our data partners to create a student data warehouse. So this will become a single source of truth for a lot of these student data sources. So right now, only Compass at the bottom is pulling reports from our Compass database or pulling data. In the future, we will be just one of several partners that can pull all from the same system. So our data will be pulling from it, OIR can pull their, to do their third-week census reporting from it, the Teaching and Learning Research Center can do the research based off of it, so everybody will be operating off the same base data set, which should help a lot with some consistency issues that some users have pointed out, especially between how OIR counts people and how Compass counts people. people who have access, I'm just going to kind of skip half the slide, but the oversight one's a really important part. So in order to gain access to Compass reports, we have to have all of our users demonstrate what is called legitimate educational interest. This is defined in UCI policies, as part of FERPA, the federal laws, all that kind of stuff. But basically, you have to prove that you should have access to this data in order to complete your day-to-day job. If anybody wants access and not sure if they have LEI, just contact us and we'll work through that process. We also require everybody to complete FERPA training. There's an online FERPA training module created by the registrar's office that people can go through. We're hoping that that will eventually be something that's required to be renewed every couple of years. It's really useful information, pretty short training, but still a lot of good content in there. And whenever we grant access to that individualized student data, the registrar is involved in the approval process. So our other key criteria is that users have to have access to WebAdmin, which is the registrar's student data lookup tool, and transcripts within that, which gives access to class enrollment, when students enroll, and the grades that they earned in those classes. As long as they have all that, they can have access to Compass. There are also reports that just aggregate data. They don't show identifiable student data. It's a little more lax there. So we grant access now to all the deans, associate deans, chairs, and faculty around campus. And again, there's no identified student data there. There's a small cell size protection. So classes with fewer than 10 students enrolled, you typically can't run the report if you're a faculty member. If you do need access to that for a research project or something, we encourage faculty to contact OIR, the registrar, for those needs. So this is what our reports look like. Halfway through our presentation, you can actually see it. Our first screen on everything is what we call a filters page. So this is basically a whole lot of checkboxes or radio buttons where people can configure exactly what they want out of the report. I have a couple report samples that I'll show you, and I'll step through how these work in a second. And then we have two types of output. The top left, the one that's covered, it's basically a giant spreadsheet. So the report that's actually displayed up there, the lower division writing progress report, is an 80-column wide report. That just has a ton of data in it, but it's what the advisors wanted. So it displays information on every single possible lower division writing class a student could take, how many times they earned it, and the highest grade they earned in that class, as well as data from the Academic Testing Center, the graphics data. That red field is how long they've been at UCI. So if they haven't completed it within a certain amount of time, they get highlighted red, so I can kind of focus on students who haven't finished it by the end of their sixth term here at UCI, which is the policy. And then we also have these dashboard or visualization type reports where we take data, kind of synthesize it into a more visual format. So it's a little bit easier to interpret. So these are the reports that are available right now. There's nothing in this presentation about the academic administrator report. If somebody has questions about those, reach out to compass@uci.edu, and I can walk through those later. That just made the slide actually too big. But we divide our reports into two categories. On the left, you have insights. These are reports that help users learn and discover more about their students. And then progress, which is used to monitor and intervene as needed. So under Learn and Discover Insights, we have three reports: student demographics, course grade distributions, and course demographics. Those latter two are aggregate data visualization or dashboard reports that are also available to faculty members with those restrictions I mentioned earlier, to 10 students or more. It's important to note that for both of those, faculty are not limited to just classes they have taught or just classes in the department in which they teach. They can access all classes at the university going back about 5 years, sometimes more depending on the report. On the right side is progress. So we have 4 reports there. Academic progress, which was our old probation report, we renamed it to academic progress. It has a whole lot of checkboxes in it. The reason so that they can kind of see like students who are not only struggling, underperforming a little bit, but also students who are overperforming, not overperforming, performing well, to maybe encourage them to reach out for scholarship opportunities and all that kind of stuff, as well as ways to kind of view what's called the murky middle. So there's this group of students who are right in the middle. Their GPA, as we define it, is between a 2.0 and 2.75. So these are students who, they're not under 2.0, which gets the attention of advisors. They're not over 3 point whatever, so they're not getting scholarship opportunities and stuff necessarily. Then this kind of middle ground, maybe with some outreach and intervention, they could be bumped up. Or at the lower end of the range, it can prevent them from kind of sliding back a little bit. So we have one filter around that. We're hoping to improve those sorts of offerings in the future. We also provide the lower division writing report, which I showed earlier, UC requirements, and academic pathway progress, which is used to kind of look up completion of course sequences as well as grades earned in course sequences. So in the last few minutes we have, I'll try to walk through some of the use cases and show how the report's going to actually be used. So for our first use case, this one's focused on faculty members. So the problem here is that the associate dean in engineering wants to know the demographic makeup of Engineering 54, which is a material science class, in a spring quarter, so they can understand more about the enrollment in that course. So without Compass, this, I'd say it's possible, I don't know if anybody could have or would have ever actually done this, but an ad hoc request to the registrar's office to get that data. And then if they happen to have access to web admin, or they work with an advisor who can aggregate and anonymize the data, they could do one-off lookups in web admin. It would be a challenge. With Compass, they can just run a report. And that fun fact is no longer true because we actually have two reports available now. So in this report, it's really tiny, but on the left side, I typed in Engineering 54. On the right side, I typed in Math 2B, and I'll point out why in just a moment. And then I click Run Report. It will spin for a little bit, and then eventually I get my output. So the first screen of it will show me the class at the top. So there are 163 students enrolled. The middle class level shows that most of these students are juniors and seniors. This is based on units completed, not based off how long the student has been at UCI. So for example, a lot of first year students become sophomores during their first year because our students come in with so many AP and stuff like that. Down below, you'll see a population breakdown. So in this case, we're showing first generation. There are 47% of the students in this class. 33% were low income, 13% were international. Below that are transfer students and people in the students in the campus-wide honors collegium. So there are two more that are hidden below. On the right side is a breakdown by major. So in this case, as one might expect, most of the students are mechanical or civil engineering or some other form of engineering. If the student is a double major, they're double counted on this report, so it can look a little weird. On the very top left, you'll see we have two tabs, demographics and academics. I forgot to put in the academics tab, but what that would show us would be the percentage of students who have completed the writing requirement, which was really important because there's a writing component in almost every class. Almost every class of UCI students have to write something. So it's really helpful, I think, for instructors to kind of have data on how many students have completed the college level writing requirements that UCI has in place. It also shows the percentage of students who are concurrently enrolled in a LARC section. So that can also be useful to know how many of your students are actually taking advantage of that program. The percentage of students who are repeating the class. So if you look, for example, at a class like Math 2B, which is the second class in the calculus sequence, a lot of students tend to repeat that class. So this can be helpful for instructors to realize, hey, X percent of your students are taking this again, so maybe make sure that you kind of realize what's going on and tweak your teaching as necessary or as you feel fit. And the class I put in before, so this Math 2B one, I wish I had a screenshot, it would show me the percentage of students who completed that class and the average course grade that they earned in that class. So instructors can put in the prereq to kind of understand how their students perform in that prerequisite course. They could also put in a completely random class if they wanted, so they could look at Engineering 54 and a dance class if they wanted. And it would show data too, although probably not a lot of crossover between those two. You might also notice under the, I'll point with my cursor, not my pen. Under first generation, low income international, we have these links. These links are provided as a way to access these resources created by the Division of Teaching Excellence and Innovation. So there are like 6 or so of these that Andrea Aebersold and CTEI created for these reports. The 2 that I've highlighted here are increasing success for low-income students and engaging first-generation students. They're also available directly off the DTEI website that URL above. But these are provided to faculty, so it's like, I know that 44% of my students are, low income. What can I do to kind of help those low-income students out and facilitate their success in my class? One of the tips on here is put your book on course reserve. So if you have students who can't afford your textbook, because textbooks are super expensive. If it's on course reserve, students can go to the library and kind of check out the book there. And we're hoping to have more of these resources created as we move through. Any questions about this report? Okay. So for our next one, this will highlight our demographics report. In spring quarter, ICS needs to identify all female, Hispanic, first-generation students to participate in a certain program before they could have used those third-week spreadsheets they get from the registrar at the end of quarter ones or perform an ad hoc or request an ad hoc data request. With Compass, they just choose these 4 boxes, get run report, and they get this. So they'll get a list of all the students who met those criteria, and then a list of email addresses so they can do their outreach, and then they're done with the report. So this is one of the really common use cases for our report. Set up a bunch of filters, get the students you want, download it to Excel, do a mail merge, and send out the email to your students. Yes?
Can you say that again? This also has contact information, so you could aggregate.
Yeah.
That's great.
So all of these reports instead of giant spreadsheets, on the far right side, they have a common set of columns that are on all of the reports. That includes pretty much everything that you can see, although it's really tiny. But things like email address, gender, ethnicity, first generation, low income, California resident, veteran, and international student, plus a couple other ones. Those are common on all of our spreadsheet reports. We provide all the data that is key to the report on the left, and then we have all the other data on the right, which can help to provide more insight into the students that are displayed on that report. And our last one is probation monitoring. So after winter grades are submitted, School of Biological Sciences wants to get a list of all students who earned a GPA of less than 2.0 for 2 consecutive terms, so they can help those students out. The way that this happened before was they would use the end of term reports from the registrar for the current quarter, and then take the previous quarter, merge them together, and then go about their day. With our system, they check a couple boxes. The blue arrows are to highlight what I talked about before. So this is the report that lets you look at high GPA students and that murky middle that I mentioned down there. And they run the report and they get this. So they get a list of all the students whose two-term GPA was less than 2.0, which is this column here. This column here. So this report originally just showed the probation status of students, which was a calculated field based off the UCI catalog. So there is a catalog definition of probation. What we found is that a lot of units had either tweaks on that definition or additional criteria that they wanted. So we stopped basing our report off of those two fields that we got from the registrar's office, and we turned it into this series of little X's. So it's all these kind of like risk factors that students could have. So like GPA less than 2.0 for the term, for 2 terms, cumulative for 1 term, cumulative for 2 terms, completed fewer than 12 units for a term, so all those sorts of things that all go into the calculation for probation, but we left it up to the advisors to use this data how they wanted to use it or needed to use that. And just putting these two columns together, the current term GPA and previous term GPA, was immediately useful to our users. So having that data right next to each other made it really easy for them to kind of do a little micro trend analysis on only 2 data points. In like 1 minute, I will show some of our partner efforts. So OIR has created a couple really cool tools. They're called ribbon tools. The first one's a major migration tool, which was inspired by a tool created by UC Davis. What this shows me on the left are all students who came into UCI as an English major in 2011-2012. And it shows how they flowed through the majors. So by the end of it, half of them graduated with an English degree, 18% were no longer enrolled, and the rest graduated from some other school at UCI. This can be kind of useful to tell, like, students who come with this degree, where do they actually end up after 4 by 6 years? Which are these very cutoffs that we see here. And they have a report that does the inverse. So in this case, I took informatics, which is on the right side. So informatics is a program that most students don't directly enroll in when they start UCI. They transfer to it within their first or second year. So for all the students who graduate with an informatics degree by the end of their 6th year, where did they come from? So in this case, on the far left, you can see they came from computer science, engineering. 12% of them started in informatics. 16% started in UVU, so undergraduate, undeclared. So this is a really interesting way to kind of visualize, like, who are the students that are flowing into my major? And there's one more tool called ScoreShare, which is available to advisors, and it lets them view students' progress through a term, so they can see interim assignment scores during the term, so they can monitor students and intervene before the term ends and the final grades are assigned. So if they have students that they're keeping track of, and they're like, oh, you bombed this midterm, let me call you to my office and we can discuss strategies for success, stuff like that. So a lot of the advising offices around campus are actually using this report, or this tool. And in the last 40 seconds, are there any questions? Yes.
We love using Compass, so thanks. One issue we've had is when we're doing, like the demographic one you talked about with the Hispanic first gen, we'll do things like that. And I'll do, the run Excel, and it just seems so long to download that it seems like it always freezes, and I don't know if we're not doing it right, but it has been sometimes like 15 minutes, it's trying to download doing Excel.
I'll talk to you right after this talk.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah.
In the past, we talked about tracking certain populations. Is that going to be something that's going to happen in the future?
Yeah, so we have another project called cohort markers, so small units that don't have a data-driven way, a database